Why late bloomers always outlast early stars. Napoleon Hill's secret: we live in a culture obsessed with fast success. Like the youngest billionaire, the 20-year-old genius, the prodigy who made it before most of us even figured out who we are. And because of that obsession, we've created a silent epidemic, millions of people quietly wondering if they're already too late, if they missed their window, if their best years were wasted in hesitation, confusion, or survival. But what if I told you that this obsession with early success is not just misleading, it's dangerous? What if the true path to mastery, legacy, and lasting power doesn't belong to the early stars, but to the late bloomers? And what if Napoleon Hill, the man who spent a lifetime studying the most successful people in history, left behind a secret about this very thing hidden in plain sight? Let's start with a simple truth. Time is not your enemy. It's your ally. But only if you understand how to use it. We've been conditioned to think that achievement has an expiration date. That if you don't make it by 25, 30, or 35, you're behind. But behind who? On whose timeline? We never stop to question the source of that pressure. And here's the irony. Most of the so-called early stars burn out before they even understand what they've built. They peak before they've developed the inner stability to carry their own success. They win the race early only to find out the race was marathon, not a sprint. Napoleon Hill, in Think and Grow Rich, studied the richest and most powerful people of his time: Carnegie, Ford, Edison, Rockefeller. And his findings were clear. The majority of truly great individuals didn't reach their peak until well into their 40s, 50s, or even 60s. Why? Because greatness is not about speed. It's about depth. And depth takes time. It takes failure. It takes reinvention. But it takes the kind of slow suffering that builds real wisdom, not just talent, but character. And character is what outlasts everyone else. So let's flip the question. Instead of asking, why am I not there yet? Ask this: what kind of foundation am I building that will actually last when I do arrive? Because the late bloomer doesn't just show up later, they show up stronger. They've been tempered. They've been tested. They've lost friends, opportunities, and illusions. They've spent years in the shadows, not wasting time but compounding it. And when they rise with certainty, or with clarity, with the kind of unshakable identity that early fame can't fake.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
We don't talk enough about the danger of early success. When you win too early, the world starts defining you before you've had a chance to define yourself. You become a brand before you become a person. You get trapped in the image of who people think you are. And that image becomes a prison. But the late bloomer? They've been free. Free to fail without the spotlight. Free to evolve without judgment. Free to explore without pressure. And that freedom creates depth, the kind of depth that can't be manufactured, rushed, or faked. Think about the oak tree. It spends years growing underground before it ever breaks the surface. No one sees the roots. No one applauds the silence. But when it finally rises, it's immovable. It weathers storms that snap younger trees in half. That's the late bloomer. They don't just grow, they anchor. And in a world full of fast flames, they become the slow burning fire that never goes out. Now ask yourself this: what if your delays, your setbacks, your detours, what if they weren't holding you back, but building you up? What if you've been in the root phase of your life, preparing for a kind of rise that can't be undone? That's not wishful thinking. That's strategy, because the longer it takes, the deeper you go. And the deeper you go, the higher you'll rise and the longer you'll last. Napoleon Hill hinted at this in one of the most overlooked sections of his work. He said that many people don't find their definiteness of purpose until midlife. That's not failure, that's maturity. That's the hard-earned clarity that comes from living, losing, loving, breaking, and rebuilding. It's the wisdom that can only be gained through time. And in a world obsessed with speed, wisdom is the most disruptive force of all. So here's a thought that might reframe your entire life. You haven't been waiting. You've been preparing, and preparation always feels slow. It feels invisible. It feels like nothing's happening. But when it's done right, it builds something no one can take from you. Not algorithms, not opinions, not even failure. Because you didn't rise by accident. You rose by design. Let me ask you something you may have never dared to ask yourself. What if you're not late, you're just early for the life that actually fits you? The compound effect of invisible work, why the late bloomer's path is actually the smartest one. There's a strange kind of magic that happens when no one is watching. The world measures success by visibility, by how many people see you, follow you, know your name. But the real work, the work that actually lasts, is usually done in the dark. It's the work no one claps for. The hours of studying when everyone else is partying. The lonely decisions to walk away from comfort. The countless projects that never made it past your hard drive. The pages thrown away. The businesses that failed. The painful almosts that didn't land. But what if I told you that none of it was wasted? The late bloomer's path is built on what I call invisible work. The kind of work that doesn't give you dopamine, but gives you depth. You see, most people chase speed and visibility. They want fast wins, viral moments, applause. But they don't realize that every shortcut creates a weakness. Every time you skip a step, you skip a layer of strength. And that strength is what the late bloomer accumulates without even realizing it. Slowly, quietly, patiently. They're not building a facade, they're building infrastructure. Mental, emotional, strategic. And that infrastructure becomes their superpower. But here's where it gets profound. Invisible work has a compound effect, but not in the way we usually think. It doesn't just stack skills, it forges identity. Every setback, every failure, every quiet victory you never posted on social media, it's not just adding to your resume, it's shaping your soul. It's teaching you how to think, how to endure, how to choose. You're learning discernment, not just discipline. And that distinction is everything. Because discipline gets you to the door. But discernment tells you which door is yours. Think about how most people operate. They chase opportunity like a lottery ticket, always looking for the next big thing, always rushing, always reacting. But the late bloomer, because they've spent so much time in the shadows, they don't rush. They recognize. They can smell what's real. They know when something aligns and when something's just noise. That kind of clarity doesn't come from books or hacks, it comes from seasons of obscurity, from years of listening to your own voice when no one else is echoing it back. And this is where the genius of Napoleon Hill comes back into play. One of the most misunderstood ideas in Think and Grow Rich is the concept of definiteness of purpose. People think it means knowing your exact path early on, what you want, how to get it, when it will happen. But But Hill himself admitted that most people develop their purpose over time through struggle, failure, and reflection. It doesn't arrive like a lightning bolt, it arrives like a whisper, and most people miss it because they're too busy trying to go viral instead of going inward. The late bloomer doesn't miss it because they've been walking through the fog so long, they've learned how to hear that whisper. They've stopped looking for signs outside themselves and started trusting the quiet knowing within. That's the real payoff of invisible work. Not just skill, but self-trust. And self-trust is the root of every lasting success story you've ever heard. Let's get brutally honest for a second. Most early stars don't make it because they never had to build that trust. Things came easy. The world rewarded them before they were ready. And when the applause faded or when they needed to evolve, they had no internal compass. They'd built a brand, not a backbone. But the late bloomer, they've walked through enough silent seasons to know who they are without the noise. So when their moment comes, they don't flinch. They don't get drunk on the spotlight. They don't panic when things get hard, because they've already been forged in the dark. So let me ask you again, if nothing you're doing right now ever went viral, would it still be worth doing? Would you still write, build, study, train, reflect? Would you still pursue this path if no one ever clapped? If your answer is yes, then you're already ahead of most people. Because that answer means you're not addicted to validation, you're committed to becoming. And that's the real secret. The late bloomer doesn't bloom late. They bloom right on time after they've done the invisible work that makes the bloom unshakable. The philosophy of delay, why life withholds your moment until you're truly ready. There's a recurring pattern in the life of every person who eventually becomes something, an extraordinary delay, not denial, but a season or sometimes many seasons where it feels like nothing is happening. You're doing the work, you're showing up, you're learning, growing, building. And yet the reward seems to be hiding just out of reach. It's a quiet tension, a brutal patience. And most people interpret this delay as failure, as rejection, as life telling them no. But what if it's not no? What if it's not yet? And what if that delay isn't a punishment but protection? What if life, in its mysterious wisdom, is holding back your moment because it knows you're still becoming the kind of person who can carry it? We often forget that desire alone is not qualification. You can want something deeply and still not be ready for it. We think readiness is about passion, hunger, or hustle. But true readiness is about structure, internal alignment, emotional resilience, strategic clarity. If you arrived at your dream tomorrow, would you know what to do with it? Would you know how to protect it, grow it, wield it without destroying yourself in the process? Most people wouldn't. And that's why life or God or the universe, whatever lens you choose, delays the breakthrough. Not to frustrate you, but to form you. This is one of the most misunderstood truths in personal development and philosophy. We think life is transactional. I do the work, I get the result. But life isn't a vending machine. It's a sculptor. And it will keep chiseling you, cutting away ego, insecurity, distraction, immaturity until the shape that remains can actually hold the weight of what you ask for. That delay, that frustration you feel, that's the chisel. That's life saying, I'm not going to let you rise until you're strong enough to stay there. Napoleon Hill touched on this in subtle ways. He spoke of the testing period that life gives every person before their greatest breakthrough. A period where your faith, your patience, Your character is pushed to the edge, not because life is cruel, but because life is intelligent. It doesn't give power to the unprepared. It doesn't hand over influence to people who haven't yet proven they can lead themselves. And if you look closely at the lives of those who rose too fast, too early, you'll see it. The cracks, the collapse, because they skipped the becoming. They skipped the delay. So let's flip the frame. What if your delay isn't a detour, it's design? What if every rejection, every closed door, every moment of obscurity is life's way of saying, stay with it? You're not ready yet, but you're getting closer. That's not failure, that's formation. And the person who understands this doesn't resent the delay, they revere it. They see it as sacred, as the invisible grace that is shaping them behind the scenes. Because when the moment does come, and it will, they'll be able to hold it. Not with fear, but with fullness. Let's get brutally honest again. How many people do you know who got what they wanted, only to lose it? The relationship, the money, the business, and the fame. They got the thing, but they didn't have the strength to keep it. That's what premature success does. It exposes what you didn't build. But the late bloomer, they didn't just chase the dream. They became the dream. They built themselves into the type of person who doesn't need the moment to prove anything. The moment is just a reflection of who they already are. So let me ask you, what if your current season of waiting is not a curse, but a classroom? What if the silence, the slowness, the invisibility is the most important part of your story? Would you still rush through it? Or would you lean in and ask, what is this delay trying to teach me about myself? Because the moment you stop fighting the delay and start listening to it, everything changes. But you stop feeling behind. You stop feeling forgotten. And you begin to feel forged. Remember this, life doesn't withhold your moment out of cruelty. It withholds it out of care, because it wants you to keep what you're building. It wants your success to be a symphony, not a spark. And symphonies take time. Legacy over hype. Why the late bloomer builds what time cannot erase. There's a quiet dignity in the journey of the late bloomer. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that commands respect. You see, in a world addicted to hype, viral moments, overnight fame, instant validation, the late bloomer is building something entirely different: legacy. While everyone else is chasing the next big thing, they are patiently, intentionally crafting the only thing that truly matters in the end, something that lasts. And that's the final, most powerful reason why late bloomers always outlast early stars, because they build what time itself cannot erase. Hype is a spark. It's loud, fast, and fleeting. It burns bright, but then it's gone, replaced by the next trend, the next sensation, the next shiny thing. And if you build your life on hype, you'll always be at the mercy of attention. You'll be chasing relevance like a shadow you can never quite catch. And when the applause dies down, as it always does, you'll be left wondering if any of it was ever real. But the late bloomer doesn't chase the spotlight. They become the light, slowly, steadily, deliberately. They're not trying to impress the world, they're trying to impact it. And that distinction is everything. Legacy is not loud. It doesn't need to be. Legacy is quiet power. It's built in the dark, tested in the fire, and revealed only when it's ready. And unlike hype, legacy doesn't fade. In fact, it grows over time. It deepens, it multiplies, it echoes beyond the lifetime of the person who built it. That's what the late bloomer is after, not a moment, but a movement. Not attention, but transformation. And that's why they always win in the long run, because they're not playing the same game. Napoleon Hill understood this. He spent his life studying not just how people succeeded, but how they endured. And what he found was simple but profound. The ones who lasted weren't the ones who burned the brightest, they were the ones who built the deepest roots. They knew that if you want something to last 30, 40, 50 years or even generations, you have to build slowly. You have to think long. You have to sacrifice the thrill of now for the truth of forever. And here's the irony, the late bloomer's work often doesn't get celebrated until it's done, until it's undeniable, until time itself becomes the proof. Because while everyone else is sprinting to be seen, the late bloomer is walking toward immortality, not in the mythological sense, but in the impact sense, in the ability to change lives, shape culture, and leave behind something that continues to breathe long after they're gone. Hype dies with the headline. Legacy lives in the hearts you've touched. So let me leave you with this. If you find yourself blooming later than others, if you feel like you're still underground while the world is already harvesting, don't rush your process. Don't envy the early stars. Most of them will flicker out before they ever understand why they rose at all. But you are building something sacred, something solid, something unshakable. And when it finally blooms, it won't just be beautiful, it will be indestructible. Now ask yourself the final, most important question: are you building for applause or are you building for eternity? Because you cannot have both. One fades the moment the crowd leaves. The other grows louder with time. In the end, it's not about when you bloom. It's about what your bloom becomes. And the late bloomer, they become the kind of force that time, trend, and even death cannot erase. So bloom slow, bloom deep, bloom true, because that's how you outlast them all.